The generation that was told to go outside and be home when the streetlights come on is now getting criticized for being too involved in their children's lives. And honestly, that paradox tells you everything you need to understand about Gen X parents. If you grew up in the 60s, 70s, or early 80s, you probably remember coming home to a completely empty house. Your parents weren't there. They were working, both of them probably for the first time in American history at that kind of scale. According to U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data, between 1970 and 1990, the percentage of mothers in the workforce with children under 6 jumped from around 37% to nearly 60%. You were a latchkey kid. You let yourself in, made something to eat, figured it out. A 2004 study by the research firm Reach Advisors defined Gen X as one of the least parented, least nurtured generations in American history. And that isn't hyperbole. It's a documented pattern. Your mom was not going to call the school to contest your grades. Your dad was not going to intervene in your friendship drama. He'd tell you to work it out yourself, or not at all. That daily experience of autonomy had a fundamental and lasting impact on how you came to see the world, what you expected from it, and what you learned not to. The independence was real, but it came packaged with something else that took longer to name. A kind of emotional self-sufficiency that looked like strength from the outside, and sometimes felt like loneliness from the inside. Fast forward to now, and if you pay attention to what Gen X parents say about their own parenting, not what commentators say about them, but what they actually say themselves, a striking pattern emerges. They are remarkably reflective about it, unusually honest. Many Gen X parents will tell you directly that their latchkey childhood still shapes how they show up for their kids today. That they made a conscious, deliberate decision to parent differently, not because their own parents were villains, but as a direct response to what they themselves didn't get to have growing up. This has produced what some researchers and observers have started calling stealth fighter parents. It's a precise and somewhat perfect description. They are not hovering over their children 24 hours a day the way some parenting cultures seem to demand. Most of the time, they'll let their kids handle their own drama, make their own mistakes, find their own way through. But when something actually matters, when something real is at stake, they go all in. They will show up to the principal's office ready to fight for their child with an intensity that catches everyone in the room completely off guard. This was never the plan for most of them. Many Gen X parents will tell you they swore they wouldn't be overbearing. They valued the independence they developed growing up. They respected what it had given them. But then they had children, and something quietly shifted. The memory of coming home to an empty house, of navigating problems alone, of wondering in a low, persistent way whether anyone was really paying close attention to you. That memory doesn't stay neatly in the past when you become a parent. It comes flooding back, often without warning, reframed entirely by the new perspective of being the one responsible for making sure that experience doesn't repeat. To understand what Gen X parents are actually trying to do, it helps to know about the work of developmental psychologist Diana Baumrind, who spent decades mapping the architecture of parenting styles. She identified that parents can essentially be understood through two dimensions. The first is responsiveness, how emotionally warm and available you are to your children, how much you tune into their feelings and needs. The second is demandingness, how clearly you set expectations, hold boundaries, and require your children to meet standards. When you map these two dimensions, 4 parenting styles emerge. Authoritarian parents are high on demandingness and low on warmth, strict, structured, but not particularly emotionally available. Permissive parents are the opposite, high on warmth but low on expectations, loving but reluctant to enforce consequences. Uninvolved parents score low on both. And then there is the authoritative style, high on both responsiveness and demandingness, simultaneously. Authoritative parenting isn't the easiest to describe in a sentence, but it sounds something like, "I care about you deeply, I am genuinely here for you, and you still have to face the consequences of your decisions." Warmth and accountability together, rather than one at the expense of the other. The research on outcomes is extensive and consistent across decades of developmental psychology. Children raised with authoritative parenting tend to develop stronger emotional regulation, higher self-esteem, greater resilience in the face of setbacks, and lower rates of anxiety and depression. They perform better academically and develop stronger social skills. The correlation has been replicated enough times that it functions less like a theory and more like an established finding. There is no large-scale study formally classifying Gen X as an authoritative generation. But when you listen to how they talk about what they're trying to do as parents, be present without being suffocating, set limits without being cold, show up completely while still letting their children struggle, the shape of that intention maps onto Baumrind's framework with striking precision. If what you're recognizing in this feels familiar, if you see yourself or someone you love in this portrait, take a moment to like this video. It helps more people find this conversation. And if the psychology beneath generational patterns is something you want to keep exploring, subscribe. This is exactly the kind of work we do here. Gen X parents also carry a specific, earned relationship with economic reality that shapes how they prepare their children for the world. They graduated into recessions. They watched stable retirement plans disappear from under entire industries. They saw job security transform from a reasonable expectation into a privilege their parents had experienced, but they never quite would. When you grow up learning that the system will not always protect you, not because you were cynical, but because the evidence was right in front of you, it changes how you approach the task of raising children. You can't promise them stability with the confidence of someone who actually believes it. So instead you try to make them capable, resourceful, resilient enough to handle whatever version of the world actually shows up for them. And they're doing all of this in a world their own childhoods gave them no preparation for. Gen X is the first generation raising children in the full presence of social media, where every parenting choice is visible, comparable, and subject to instant judgment from strangers. For people who grew up when privacy was the default, when your worst moments dissolved rather than living online permanently, the pressure to perform parenthood for an audience feels profoundly unnatural. The instinct to post every milestone, every achievement, every ordinary Tuesday of their child's life. Many Gen X parents find this not just uncomfortable but genuinely alien, which may partly explain why Gen X parents often seem emotionally tired in a way that is specific and understandable once you see the full picture. They are the sandwich generation. On one side, aging parents who need increasing support, care, and attention. On the other, children navigating a world of social media, academic pressure, and economic uncertainty. In between, career demands that haven't softened, financial stress that hasn't resolved, and the ongoing psychological work of trying to be a different kind of parent than they had without a clear map for how to do it. They are being squeezed from both directions at once. Boomer parents who think they're coddling their kids, Gen Z children who sometimes think they're too strict, and, in the middle, they're left translating between worlds that no longer speak the same language, trying to make themselves understood by people on either side who are operating from entirely different sets of assumptions about what family, work, and responsibility are supposed to look like. Your parents think you're too soft. Your kids think you're too hard. And you're just trying to take what was genuinely valuable about how you were raised, the independence, the problem-solving, the resilience forged in the quiet of an empty house, and combine it with what you wished you'd had, the emotional availability, the presence, the specific and sustaining sense that someone was genuinely, reliably paying attention to you. What's notable about Gen X parents, according to those who study generational behavior, is that they tend not to anchor their sense of success to external validation. The latchkey experience taught them something that proved durable. External approval is unreliable at best, and building your life around it is a fragile strategy. So they parent from an internal compass. One calibrated not by what parenting books say, or what the internet currently recommends, but by their own memories, by the felt experience of what it was like to be a child, what they needed, what was missing, and what actually helped. This means they'll let their teenager make the same mistake twice, because they understand from experience that repetition is sometimes exactly how genuine learning happens. But they will also be there at 2 in the morning when everything falls apart, present, calm, without judgment, because they remember precisely what it felt like to need someone at 2 in the morning and have no one to call. Their relationship with technology adds one more layer of complexity to an already complicated picture. Gen X parents are old enough to remember life before the internet with genuine clarity. Childhoods where boredom was simply part of the deal, where you had to generate your own entertainment, where presence was the only mode available because there was no other option. They understand what unmediated experience actually feels like because they lived it for the first portion of their lives. And this gives their skepticism about screens a quality that pure fear can't produce. It's grounded in comparison. They know what they have. They can measure what's been lost. When they set limits around their children's screen time, it's coming from lived experience rather than anxiety about the unknown. They are simultaneously more comfortable with technology than their parents and more genuinely skeptical of it than their children. They understand the tools. They question the costs. So when you see a Gen X parent standing slightly apart from the hovering, intensely coordinating parents at a school event visibly uncomfortable with the performance of it, but still completely, unmistakably present, that's not a contradiction. That's the whole philosophy. They're trying to raise children who feel both secure and independent at the same time, who know, with certainty, that someone has their back, and who also know how to stand on their own when they need to. It isn't perfect. It almost certainly doesn't match the current consensus of parenting experts. But, for a generation that was formally documented as one of the least nurtured in modern American history, the fact that they're showing up at all emotionally present, not just physically present, not just sitting in the bleachers, scrolling on a phone, is genuinely significant. They're trying to break a cycle while keeping the parts of it that were worth keeping, and that's complicated in a way that resists neat summaries. Then again, Gen X has never been particularly interested in fitting into neat categories. If you're a Gen X parent, what's the specific thing from your own childhood that changed most dramatically once you became a parent? Leave it in the comments. The answers tend to be more universal than people expect.